Welcome everybody, Ravenar here, and over the course of a couple months, we released a map guide for every single map in the ranked rotation. And what these guides were quick tip guides, 5 minutes give or take, about how to improve on these maps. So what I'm going to do is put all of these guides in one video, and I'm going to include skips so you can jump to any guide you want to. But before we start with that, I want to encourage you guys to check me out on Twitch. I'm going to post a link to that down below in the description. And of course, if you do like these videos, make sure that you subscribe, hit that notification button. But without any further ado, let's hop into these videos. Alterec Pass. Now, Alterec Pass has a unique objective where you first channel a point, and then you have to control the point to get some NPCs that charge down a lane for you. But without any further ado, let's hop into this tier list and kind of show you what's good here. So Alterec Pass is going to have a couple of things that you're going to want to focus on. You, of course, are going to have your globals like your Brightwing, your Dahaka, your Falstad, your Deathwing, but you're also going to want to look at things that are going to help you take the camps, and more on that a little bit later, and things that are going to help you take the boss. So wave clear type heroes are going to be very effective here. So something like a Jaina, Greymane, Vala are going to be good here. You can also go into your solo lanes helping you out as well. Something like a Sonya, potentially a Leo could help you with clearing those camps. And then for the boss, obviously things like Greymane again and Vala and Sylvanas are going to be things that are going to help you clear the boss and the camps pretty effectively. And then on the bottom side, you're going to have your normal not so good heroes, something like a Cho'Gall. Butcher, not going to get as much value because it is going to be a bigger map. And stuff like Nazebo, just a lot of these heroes down here, they really suffer on bigger maps. So a lot of these that even if I don't talk about are going to still suffer from that. But Nazebo and Butcher are going to probably be two of the bigger names to note here. Welcome back. Like on many other maps, you're going to notice that globals are going to be strong here. So you want to make sure that you're always keeping that in mind while you're drafting. Now, unlike a lot of other maps, this map is only going to have two different kinds of camps. You're going to have your siege camp and you're going to have your boss. We're going to start by talking about the siege camp. Now, the thing with these are they're not super strong, but they do have a very specific use on this map. Probably the biggest advantage that the siege camp has is going to be a really short cooldown. So you want to make sure that you are taking it every opportunity you can, starting at the very beginning of the game. It will spawn 1 minute in, and your most optimal way to take it is to take it immediately. That way, it will be up again right as the objective spawns, and you get to take it a second time. And what that does is create pressure in the middle lane that your opponent now has to deal with. If they leave that camp alone, it's going to get a lot of value if left on its own. So the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be the boss. Now, I would say that the boss is more of a high risk, medium reward sort of camp. So you want to make sure that you have at least a 2-player advantage before you even attempt to take the boss. Otherwise, you're going to run the risk of your opponent potentially invading and taking the boss from you. Keep in mind that because of the nature of the core regenerating itself, even a boss free pushing the lane isn't actually going to be able to end the game if you only have one keep down, which makes the boss a little bit weaker until you start having multiple keeps down. And this is also going to be the case for any lane by itself in general anyway, meaning under normal circumstances, even if a lane is already pushed up to the core is going to be able to clear that lane and regenerate itself before the threat of another wave pushes up, which means that anytime you just have one keep down, you don't have to worry about it pushing up and ending the game. So the next thing I want to talk about is going to be the objective. The biggest thing to keep in mind is to realize that losing the objective doesn't mean you're going to lose the game. So if you have a player disadvantage, a 4v5 for example, don't try to force the objective, just back up, push out the lanes as much as you can, and prepare for a defense. You have a much better chance of surviving the incoming wave if you prep for it than if you try to stop the objective down a player and potentially end up getting wiped and snowballed even more. So you always want to make sure that you're prepping for the defense if you do have a player disadvantage. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is what to do when you win the objective. Now, if it's early game, you want to make sure that you're soaking all 3 lanes if you can do so safely, because the early objectives don't actually do that much. So you want to utilize them to give yourself as much of an experience lead as possible. And if you happen to get some structural advantage, that'll be more of a bonus. You want to be utilizing the first one to get that bit of an experience lead. Now, the later objectives, if you're winning them, those are the ones where you want to send 4 people, sometimes even 5 people in one lane, and try to push down one of the priority lanes, which is going to most likely be either top or bot, depending on which one is pushed in more. And try to force as close to the keep as you can, if not through the keep. So you can start lowering the armor on the core and start prepping for an eventual end. Battlefield of Eternity. So this map's going to work a little differently than the 3-lane maps that you guys might be used to, because there's going to be a little bit different priority in the heroes that you pick here. So let's go ahead and hop into the tier list and teach you guys some stuff. So the tier list for BOE is going to be very much focused on race heroes, characters that can do a lot of damage to the Immortal. So characters like Vala, Greymane, Raynor, even Artanis are going to have a lot higher priority on this map, where heroes like Abathur won't, because it's a 2-lane map. Same thing with Viking, same thing with Butcher. All these are bad on 2-lane maps. And then characters like Genji, for example, because there will be a lot of fighting, and a character like Cho'Gall could see a little bit more play because it is a smaller map, as well as siege characters like Sergeant Hammer. So all of these up here are going to be a lot better at close quarters fighting, maybe like a KT. So you're going to see a lot more priority in heroes like that. Welcome back. So one thing you are noticing is race heroes are going to be very important here. But most importantly, you got to make sure that your race heroes have their talents that help them race. So if you have something like Vala, you're going to want to go Hungering Arrow at level 7. And if you go Artanis, you got to make sure that you go an Amateur Opponent at level 1. And every one of these heroes that is considered a race hero has a specific talent that helps them be that race hero. It's not enough just to pick the hero. If you pick Raynor, you need to go Exterminator, or it's not really going to be that race hero you want it to be. So make sure when you are drafting these race heroes that you are picking the appropriate talents to go along with them. Another thing to keep in mind when you're building a comp is there are 2 different kinds of comps that you can build. There's obviously the race comp, which is the one I would recommend, but that doesn't always happen based on what your team wants to draft. Sometimes you end up with a team fight comp anyway. The last thing you want to do is try to race with your team fight comp. If you end up with characters that can't race, you always want to defend, and you want to try to wipe out the enemy team so you can take your Immortal. Otherwise, you're never really going to have the opportunity to do so. The next part of this map is obviously going to be the camps. So there are going to be 2 different kinds of camps on this map. There are going to be the Impalers, which are going to be the small camps that are located on the top and bottom of that map. And then there's going to be the Fallen Shaman camps, which are, I would call them medium camps that like to spawn additional minions when they're pushing. So when it comes to the camps, there's a couple strategies you can use with both of these camps. So the Impaler camps that are on the bottom, if you end up with a player advantage on the bottom side of the map, you could use that advantage to take those Impalers and push with them, whether it be before the objective spawns or just while you guys are in lane. And in response to the objective as well, the Fallen Shaman camp that are on the left side or the right side of the map in the center, you want to utilize those and send those right before the objective spawns. So the first objective, for example, you can send those about 2 minutes and 40 seconds into the match, because that will be 20 seconds before the objective spawns, and it'll give it a good push right into the enemy towers, and they'll either have to split off and clear it or risk losing structural advantage. Keep in mind though, your enemies will probably do the same thing to you. So what you want to do in that case is utilize your team to clear it real quick, maybe during the halftime, if you guys can force halftime, or try to defend in a way that you can also clear their camp if it does happen. And today we're going to talk about Braxis Holdout. All right, because of the fact that Braxis is a 2-lane map, the priority list is going to be a little bit different on what you're going to be drafting here. But let's hop into the tier list and check it out. All right, so for Braxis, 2 of the most important things here are going to be wave clear and winning top lane. So on that note, things like Gazlowe, Deathwing, Rexxar are all going to be very good in the solo lane, as well as even something like Chen, which does slightly better in the 1v1, will be good here. And then if you're looking at wave clear, KT, Gul'dan are both going to be very good, which is why I put them in S tier. And then you got something like a Cho'Gall, which could benefit from being in the 4-man a little bit more. We have stuff like Ragnaros, and even though I'm not a fan of picking a character with the intention of losing the Zerg wave, Molten Core plus Lava Wave are both very good defenses against the Zerg wave, as well as Sergeant Hammer can do a really good job of pushing with the Zerg wave. And then on the other side, when you look at what's not so good, Butcher and Nazebo both not so good on this map. Neither of them work very well on 2-lane maps because it's hard for both of them to stack when Butcher solely relies on kills. Nazebo, not enough minion to effectively stack. Things like Vikings as well won't be very good. Zagara used to be good on this map, but recently she's kind of fallen off a little bit. So Zag, unfortunately, not very good, even though she does have push potential. And then we have things like Genji, Tracer. Gankers are going to be the only thing that ever wants to rotate top lane. So something like a Genji or Tracer would be viable here as well to try to gank their enemy solo laner. Welcome back. Well, as you've noticed, top lane, which is going to be your solo lane, is going to be very important here. So you got to make sure that you are drafting characters that can either win the top lane or you're drafting yourself a ganker that can help gank the enemy solo laner, because it's going to be very important that you hold that top lane for the objective. Another very important aspect of this map is going to be the wave clear. You want to make sure you have good wave clear, otherwise you're going to run the risk of getting snowballed. It's important to keep in mind that even a medium or even small Zerg wave can do a lot of damage if you don't have adequate wave clear to clear it. So you want to make sure that you are drafting yourself some wave clear when you are playing on this map. Another aspect of this map are going to be the camps. Now, unlike a lot of other maps, the camps on this map aren't actually that great. You're going to find yourself taking them during the objective phase if you find yourself having an advantage that you can send them, or after the objective phase is over, most teams will take their respective camps and try to send them. A lot of what these camps are going to be used for is just a little bit of an experience boost because of how easy they are to clear and how small the map is. It makes them a little bit less impactful. And while we're on the topic of the camps, we need to mention the boss. This is probably one of the weakest bosses in the game, and because of its location being the dead center of the map, it is very much a bait location to try to take the boss. And what I mean by that is a lot of teams will lose a game over trying to fight for the boss. In my opinion, you should only go for the boss when you have like at least 3 players on the enemy team dead. Otherwise, you're going to run the risk of getting invaded and being too weak from the damage that the boss does to you and losing the game because of it. And one last small mention I would like to say is keep an eye on the globe spawns that are on both the bot and the top of the map. If you have any heroes that have a globe quest, they have slightly more value if you can control the lane in completing that quest. So even something like Mana Addict on KT, W build on Gul'dan, both of those are going to be slightly stronger because of those globe spawns help those heroes stack that quest a lot easier. Cursed Hallow. Now the start of any map is going to be your draft. Now we're going to go in here and I'm going to show you guys my tier list for characters that I think are either really good or really bad on this map. Heroes down here, Cho'Gall, not great on Cursed Hollow because obviously really big map. The only reason I put Zagara so low, even though she has split push, is just because of her low viability right now. And everything down here is just going to be because of how hard it is to play. Nazebo, hard to stack. Medivh, just hard to get value with in gold. So all of these right here, not really worth talking about. Abathur is a little bit higher because it is Cursed Hollow, so Abba can be halfway viable here. Kel'Thuzad a little bit higher because of his global interrupt alt. And then we have things up here. As you know, globals are going to be very strong here. So we got things like Falstad, Brightwing, Deathwing, Dahaka. All of those are going to be very strong globally, as well as Azmodan is slightly strong. Even after the nerf, he still is going to have that split pushing capability. He might belong in B tier, but he floats between A and B. And overall, it's just going to be globals are going to be what are really strong in Cursed Hollow, and anything that can kind of just team fight in close corridors or interrupt Curse. So that's why you see things like mages up here, and just things that have long range interrupts are going to be slightly better in gold at least. Welcome back. And as you can see, because of the fact that this is a really big map, globals have a very high priority here. They let you push a far lane and then very quickly join the team fight. The next part of this map is going to be the camps. There are 3 different kinds of camps on this map. There are the giants, the knights, and then there's the boss. And all 3 of these are going to be very strong if used properly. You want to try to send these camps right before the objective pops. And what that does is it makes your opponent have to deal with something else on the other side of the map or risk losing value. So one common strategy that people like to do depends on what side of the map you start on. If you start on the left side of the map, then your giants are going to be on the top. If you start on the right side of the map, your giants are going to be on the bottom. You want to keep this in mind when the first tribute spawns. You want to make sure that if the tribute is spawning on the bottom and you're on the left side, you send your top giants at about the 2-minute 40-second mark, since the first tribute will spawn 3 minutes into the game. And because of the fact that the first tribute always spawns on either the top or the bottom of the map, one team will always have a huge advantage when it comes to that first spawn. And another big aspect to this map is going to be the boss. Now, you won't always have this option, but if you're ever in a situation where you can take the boss and then take the curse, that is going to be the most ideal situation. But the one thing you never want to do is take the curse and then take the boss. Your best option, if you can't do the first one, is to wait till you have about 15 seconds left on your curse and then back out, and then you want to take the boss. You never want the curse to wear off and you be sitting in the enemy base. Shire. Now, Shire is going to be a map where there's going to be an increased importance on top lane. So we're going to go ahead and hop into this tier list, and you're going to see kind of what's good here. So Shire is another map where winning top lane is going to be very important. So I put things like Rexxar, Gazlowe, Deathwing, things up here that have a lot easier time winning the lane. Even something like a Sonya would be pretty good up here, Diva. And I have globals pretty high priority here as well. So we got Dahaka, we got Brightwing, and then we got Sylvanas and mages for the damage dealers. So everything up here is going to be pretty good for team fighting, since you will be doing a lot of 3v3 bottom or 4v4 bottom, depending on how you decide to split up. Even something like an Abathur can be slightly better as well. And then on the flip side, something like a Cho'Gall isn't really going to be as good here because of the way that you're going to be fighting and the fact that you can't really afford to have a Cho'Gall in the Dragon Knight. Not really going to be as good here, in my opinion at least. Something like a Butcher, going to have a little bit harder time stacking with the nature of the way the map plays out. And then, of course, Medivh, Vikings, not very good at this rank, so they're not really going to be very viable here as well. And even a Hammer, even though the siege potential is there, just the way that it plays out, I don't see Hammer being as valuable because you will be utilizing the objective to siege. Welcome back. Of course, top lane is going to be the solo lane. And like I said before, it is going to be a very important lane for your solo laner. But you want to make sure that you never rotate up there unless you are a ganker. So something like a Tracer or Genji. Otherwise, you are going to lose value somewhere else on the map. What you want to do instead is use your 4-man to either push bottom or double soak mid and bottom. You never want to send your character's top lane because it's going to make you lose value somewhere else on the map, especially if you see your opponent doing that. You want to make sure that you use that advantage, that 4v3 advantage that you have, to get structural advantage bot lane. So the next part of this map that we're going to talk about is going to be the camps. So you're going to have knights and giants on your side of the map, and then you're going to have a neutral knights on the bottom of the map. Now, one thing to keep in mind is these camps can be very powerful, but you got to make sure that you are not giving up the objective to get a camp. But one common strategy you can use is if you end up with a player advantage via kills, you can take your giants and the knights bot lane, and you want to combine them together and push the lane as 4. That gives you a decent amount of structural damage from the giants, and the spell aura from the knight camp helps you siege pretty safely and really effectively. So as you've noticed here, bot lane is going to be our priority lane here because of all the camps that you can utilize down there. But another thing to keep in mind is you want to avoid at all costs pushing top lane. There's going to be a bridge top lane that people refer to as the death bridge. And the reason for that is because it is such a close quarter area that the enemy team has a tremendous advantage when it comes to defending on that with AoE abilities. So you want to make sure that you are avoiding that at all costs. So one last tip I want to throw out there is about utilizing the Dragonite. When you get the Dragonite, what you want to do is position yourself either above or below one of the towers when you are sieging the gate. What that does is make it so only one tower can hit you at a time, and that is going to help prolong the duration of your Dragonite. Garden of Terror. Now, Garden of Terror is going to be one of the bigger maps in the ranked rotation, as well as a map that has a high priority on the camps on that map because they have multiple functions. They push with the objective, as well as helping you when you are behind. More on that later. But first things first, let's hop into this tier list and teach you guys some stuff. So Garden of Terror is going to be one of the bigger maps. And what that means is, of course, your globals are going to be really effective here. Stuff like Falstad, Brightwing, Deathwing, Dahaka, all going to be extra important on this map. But the importance of the camps are going to make it so wave clear and camp taking heroes are going to be extra effective here. I prefer things like Jaina if you are going the mage route to help you utilize taking the camps, as well as something like a Sylvanas, a Sonya again, Gazlo. Those are all going to be things that are going to be extra effective when it comes to utilize and taking the camps. And then when it comes to the objective themselves, things that help you set up, which is why Gazlo is ranked so high here with his ability to set up turrets on the objective beforehand, could utilize him fairly effectively. And then on the bottom side, you're going to have your normal heroes that struggle on bigger maps. Something like a Nazebo is not really going to be able to be as effective on a bigger map, as well as a Butcher. Medivh just struggles at this rank, and of course a bigger map he's just going to have issues as well. Welcome back. Now, of course, since this is a bigger map, globals are going to have a high priority on this map, so things like Dahaka, Falstad are going to be really strong here. Now, to me, the camps on this map are going to be one of the most important things for you guys to learn how to utilize. So I'm going to be spending a bit of time teaching you how to use these camps to your advantage, both when you're ahead and when you're behind as well. The first thing I do want to mention would be, as important as these camps are, you want to make sure that you are not giving up the objective to take them if you can take an even fight, because the objective is still going to be the most important part of the maps. You want to be utilizing the camps to supplement the map, not take them in place of the objective. So you always want to be prioritizing the objective when you can do so on even footing. All right, there are going to be 3 sets of camps on your side of the map. There are going to be 2 giant camps, and there are going to be a knight camp. Now, the first question is going to be, when should I take these camps? Now, in my opinion, you want to take these camps, usually starting with the giants, right when they spawn, just so you can get the cooldown reset on them so they'll spawn again sooner, and so you can get a bit of pressure in whatever lane they're going to be pushing in. What this is going to do is immediately cause your opponent to have to respond to them, and if it's during an objective phase, that's going to give you an additional advantage than if you hadn't have taken them. And if you end up taking them while you have a disadvantage, that's going to make your opponent have to use their advantage that they got. Maybe they just got a team wipe or something, but if they already have camps pushing against their structures, they're going to have to use their advantage to clear the camps that you sent instead of pushing with the numbers advantage that they have. And you can accomplish all of this by doing something as little as just taking your camps on cooldown and making sure that they're always pushing. So we talked a little bit about what to do with the camps when you're playing from behind, but let's talk about what to do when you have an advantage. My suggestion is going to be, make sure you prioritize the lanes that have the camps already pushing in them and trying to get structural value with those. And that's going to go the same with the objective as well. If there's a camp pushing in a lane and you do get 3 of 3 for the objective, prioritize the lane again with the siege camp or the knights in it, just so you can get that additional value comboed with the objective to maximize the effectiveness that you can get in that lane. Hanamura Temple. Now, Hanamura is going to be a unique map in that one of the camps is arguably going to be more important than the actual objective. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But for right now, let's go ahead and hop into this tier list, and I'll kind of show you what's good here. So Hanamura is going to be special because the samurai camp on there is arguably going to be more effective than the actual objective on the map, which is why we favor things like Artanis, which if you are picking Artanis here, you do need to pick amateur opponent. And something like a Greymane is going to help you utilize taking the samurai camp pretty effectively, and in some instances you're going to be able to take it by yourself as well. One of the things to note here, this is probably the worst map for mages, which is why I have mages a lot lower than I normally do. Because of how wide open the map is, a lot of characters that benefit from close quarters fighting, stuff like Diablo, mages, Lucio, they tend to struggle a little bit more on a map like this because of the fact that your opponent has the ability to spread out a lot more than they normally would be able to. So that is something you want to keep in mind while you are drafting. But up here, you're going to have your normal higher tier heroes that are just slightly better because of their power. So, you got a Vala. Li Ming is one of the soul mages along with Chromie that are going to be higher on the map just because of their overall power level right now. And globals are not going to be very good here, which is why you only really see Brightwing and Falstad and Deathwing up here just because of their overall power level as well. And then on the bottom side of the map, you have your normal lower tier heroes, things like Butcher, Vikings, Nazebo, that just really don't have the ability to stack as effectively as they can on smaller maps. And while this map isn't very big, it is very conducive of 4 to 5 man roaming, which is why things like Butcher and Nazebo aren't going to be able to get as much value just because there's not really that same dynamic that you do have on smaller maps. Welcome back. Now, as you saw on the tier list, this is probably going to be one of the worst maps for mages, and I say this being a mage player myself. I recognize that because of the fact that this map is so wide open, the only real mages that are going to be viable here are going to be mages like Chromie, Li Ming, mages that are just overall strong right now at this rank. So you always want to make sure you're keeping that in mind while you're drafting. So there are going to be 3 different kinds of camps on this map. There's going to be the Vision camp, there's going to be the Turret camp, and then there's going to be the Samurai camp. Now, we're going to start with the Vision camp. That is going to be the most simple camp on this map. All it really does is give you guys vision and a bit of an experience boost. You want to make sure that you're taking this camp whenever you can do so safely because it is in a neutral location on the map. But having this vision is going to be very important when it comes to seeing the location that your opponent's going to be at on the map. So you want to make sure that you're utilizing that whenever you can. The next camp we're going to talk about is going to be the turret camp. The most important thing here is to make sure that you're taking this turret camp on cooldown. What this does is give you an item that you can place during a team fight that is going to attack the nearest player. These items are going to become very important as the game progresses, so you want to make sure you're taking this camp whenever you can. The last camp we want to talk about is arguably going to be the most important camp, the Samurai camp. And a lot of people will call this the actual objective of the game because of the simple fact that the Samurai can get a lot more value than the actual objective can. And we're going to talk about the objective a little bit later, but for right now, we're going to talk about the Samurai camp. What this camp does is have not quite boss level health, but does boss level damage. And what it's going to do is push down the nearest lane. So the most optimal way to take this camp is make sure that it's pushing while the objective is being contested, because it can push into and easily take a fort if it's left on its own. So you want to make sure that you are taking this camp every opportunity that you have. The last thing I want to talk about in reference to the camps is going to be how you use your comp to take those camps. Now, generally what you're going to be doing is having your 4-man bot and your offlaner top. Now, there's 2 different ways that you can go about handling the camps. If you have a character like maybe Greymane in your 4-man, or just a character that is comfortable taking camps on their own, they can break off and go take the camps on their own, or you can possibly break off 2 players to go take the camps. You just want to make sure that you're leaving someone bot to soak the experience. Or what you can do is rotate one of your members of your 4-man top lane to cover the experience and have your solo laner break off and start taking the camps. So if you have something like a Sonya or a Tannis with amateur opponent, those would be very viable methods as well. The biggest thing to keep in mind here is to make sure that you are not losing experience, either top or bot, when you are breaking off to take these camps. And the last thing we're going to talk about here is going to be the objective. And while I did say that this objective is on the weaker side, we want to make sure that we are utilizing it to its highest potential. And how you're going to do that is just kind of realizing how it works. Now, the objective goes faster the more players that are standing on it, up to 3. So you want to make sure that you're keeping 2 or 3 players on the objective at all times to make sure that you're maximizing the speed that the payload will go. And the next thing to keep in mind is back to what we're talking about with the camps. If you have a samurai camp pushing during this objective, it's going to force your opponent to split, which is going to get you the most value because they're going to have to split off members of their team to go clear that samurai, which is going to let you push in this objective or potentially win a team fight. And same thing when it comes to the turrets. You want to make sure that you are stockpiling as many turrets as you can to use during this objective phase. Infernal Shrines. Now, Infernal Shrines is going to be unique because there's going to be 3 different kinds of objectives that you utilize during the game. But before we get into that, we're going to hop into this tier list and kind of show you what's good here. So Infernal Shrines is a map where globals are, of course, going to have a bit of importance here. So Deathwing, Brightwing, Falstad, all characters that are going to be good here. But you're also going to have Wave Clear and characters that benefit from close quarters are going to have an increased benefit here. Because of the way that the objective spawns, you're going to be always fighting in a very close quarter area. So stuff like Mei, Gazlowe, like I said, mages are all going to get an increased value here. So you're going to want to make sure that you're keeping that in mind while you're drafting. And even something like a Sonya, Diva are going to be extra strong here because of their sustain Diva bomb, extra good on the objective as well. And something like a Hogger even will be really good here because he can angle his spin to constantly be cycling around the objective area, damaging players and damaging minions at the same time. And of course, we do have to do a special note for Ragnaros Molten Core and Alex Dragon Queen are a very good way of securing the objective as well. Even a Cho'Gall gets slightly more value on a map like this because of how tightly quartered you're going to be fighting. You'll notice that there's not even a whole lot of low tier heroes as you would see on a lot of other maps because of the way that the map is laid out. You do have stuff like Vikings and Butcher that are going to be lower, but you'll notice that all the other heroes kind of shift up in their viability. Even like a Probius could see some play here with how quickly he could turn a tide with the way that his kit works, with him being able to drop his turrets and use his AoE abilities to steal minions and team fight. Welcome back. Like on many other maps, globals are going to have a higher priority here, so you're going to want to make sure you're keeping that in mind while you're drafting. The next thing I want to talk about is going to be something that we touched on a little bit during the tier list, but it's going to be a couple of characters that give you a little extra advantage on the objective. You're going to have Molten Core with Ragnaros, you're going to have Dragon Queen with Alexstrasza, and then obviously you're going to have Diva Bomb with Diva. All of these characters on their own aren't really that strong, but they each bring a different tool that you wouldn't normally have, which is going to give them a little bit increased viability to any team fight that they're in. The last aspect we want to touch on when it comes to fighting over the objective, that there is a higher importance on zone control and AoE based heroes. Something like a Mei is going to have an increased priority because she has that zone control in her kit with her Blizzard that can kind of zone people out and potentially stun them, as well as wave clear heroes like Jaina, Kael'thas, Asmodan. All of those sorts of heroes are going to have an increased importance as well when it comes to helping take the minions that you use to get the objective. So the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be the objective, which are going to be the Punishers. Now, there are going to be 3 different kinds of Punishers here. There's going to be the Frozen Punisher, there's going to be the Arcane Punisher, and then there's going to be the Mortar Punisher. We're going to start with the Frozen one. Now, the Frozen Punisher is arguably one of the strongest Punishers in the game because of its ability to disable structures. And what that means is it is the Punisher that you always want to be pushing with. Because of the fact that it does disable structures, it doesn't actually do that much damage on its own, which means it's going to heavily rely on your team pushing along with it to get maximum value. If this Punisher just pushes on its own, it is going to get little to no value because it does not do a whole lot of damage on its own. The Mortar Punisher is probably going to be the Punisher that does the most raw damage on its own because its base attack is just the strongest out of the 3. Even though its fireballs that it shoots off aren't overly strong and are pretty easy to dodge, they can all do a significant amount of damage to structures and obviously players that stand in them. And then we're going to have the Arcane Punisher, which is probably the most annoying one to fight against because of the arcane orbs that it spawns and that does consistent damage. And those are going to be ones that do a lot of damage on their own, as well as damage after they die because of the orbs that stick around a little bit after the Punisher does die. The next thing I want to talk about is going to be what's called baiting the Punisher, which is going to be the action of making the Punisher jump over your wall as close to your fort or your keep as possible. And how you do that is generally by having your tank or your bruiser attack the Punisher as it's approaching your gate, which is going to make the Punisher jump on it because the Punisher will jump on the closest target that has attacked it. Doing that makes it so both turrets as well as your fort or keep will target the Punisher, and there'll still be a gate up that your opponent still has to push through, which lets you clear the Punisher a lot more effectively without having to worry about the enemy team. The last thing we're going to talk about are going to be the camps. Now, on your side of the map, you're going to have a Fallen Shaman camp, and you're going to have an Impaler camp. And on the bottom side of the map, you're going to have a neutral Impaler camp as well. Now, the purpose of these camps are mainly going to be just take them whenever you have a slight advantage that you can leave the lane without losing experience, or the most important time to take them is going to be right before the objective. You just want to make sure that you're utilizing these camps as effectively as possible around the timer of the objective. Sky Temple. So because of the fact that this map's objectives specifically attack your buildings, it's going to kind of put you on a bit of a timer compared to how many buildings your opponent has left. So we're going to keep that in mind as we hop into this tier list. So with the exception of a few heroes on Sky Temple, there's not really going to be a lot of drastic changes from a normal tier list. So you'll have things like just your normal S tier heroes that are just strong at the moment. So as time goes by, this very well might change, but this is what is strong right now. Abathur is good because of Mule. Mule's really strong at level 7 if you take it. Abathur can be a really strong addition to your team. Being able to heal the structures extends the life that you have on this map. Something like a Sylvanas could be slightly good as well. Even a Hammer could help push the structures in your favor. And then of course globals are going to be good here. So you got a Brightwing, you have Dahaka, Deathwing, Falstad, things like that are going to be extra good here because of the fact that you're going to want to utilize their split push capabilities and then being able to join a team fight later on to your advantage. And then on the flip side, normal things on the bottom. Nazebo, map's a little too big. Vikings slightly better, which is why they moved from D to C tier, just because of their soaking capabilities. Cho'Gall, a little bit too big of a map for Cho'Gall to be viable. And then obviously just weaker heroes down here at the bottom. Zagara, of course, she is good, but just a little bit on the weak side. Doesn't really have much viability right now. Welcome back. So of course, globals are going to be really good here because this is a really big map. You're going to be able to get a lot of value with them. So I know we mentioned it before the tier list, but the objective on this map kind of puts your life on a timer based on how many buildings you have left. So with that in mind, you always want to be prioritizing the temples, but siege heroes are also going to be very strong here and help supplement your team either during or outside of the objective phase. So with that in mind, you always want to make sure that you are giving yourself every advantage you can. If for whatever reason you're not able to capture the objective, maybe you just lost a player, you should use the remainder of your team, if you can do it safely, to siege as far away from the objective as possible to try to even up as much structural damage as you can. So the next thing we're going to want to talk about are going to be the camps. Now the camps here are actually going to be pretty important on this map. You're going to have the giants, you're going to have the knights, and of course, you're going to have the boss. You want to utilize them as effectively as you can. For example, if the objective is spawning bot, you should send your top knights when the objective spawns, so you're going to get some siege value while you're either contesting bot lane or you're pushing top lane. Same thing with the giants. If the objective spawns top or middle, you want to make sure that you're sending your giants bot lane. They can do as much damage as possible. And of course, the boss is going to make the bot lane your priority lane. This boss can very likely win you the game. So you want to make sure that you're prioritizing bot lane with any opportunities that you have. For example, bot temple is probably going to be the highest priority temple for your team to get because of the nature of the bot lane. So you always want to make sure you're keeping that in mind when you are taking the objective. Tomb of the Spider Queen. So I'm very excited about this one because Tomb is probably one of the more popular maps in the ranked rotation. So let's hop right into this tier list. So by far the most important thing on this map is going to be your wave clear. Because of the fact that it is a small map, you have a few different ways to go about it. Obviously, you got your mage route. You can go Jaina, you can go Asmo, KT. Those are all going to be very effective ways to clear the lanes. But you can also utilize your double soakers, which stuff like Sonya, Zool, Leo are all going to be very effective double soakers for you to use. Now, since this is a smaller map, you could utilize a Cho'Gall because of the fact that macro is one of his greatest weaknesses. On a smaller map, that's not as much of a factor. As well as even something like an Azebo can have a bit of an easier time stacking if he rotates with the 4-man. Something like a Medivh, which usually doesn't have too high of a priority because of the portals, you can have pretty quick rotations with your team. Even Butcher has a slightly easier time stacking on this map because of the fact that the lanes are so close together that he can do so. On the bottom side, you still have your normal weaker heroes. Ragnaros, not very strong here because of how small the map is. Lava Wave does not get as much value as it normally does. Dahaka, outside of Rayscar build, doesn't really have too much viability here because he doesn't have that long range global that he can utilize. Abathur, because of how small the map is, it's hard for him to get any sort of value. So all of these down here, not really too great. Welcome back. As you guys have noticed, wave clear is going to be your most important factor here. What it does is let you clear the objective and collect gems faster. And you are going to notice very quickly without adequate wave clear that you are going to struggle a lot into your opponent. Alright, there are two common strategies when it comes to soaking / collecting gems on this map. You can either have your 4-man bot lane and have your solo laner double soak mid and top. If you have a solo laner like Zool or Leo or someone who can do so, you can also have your solo laner bot lane and have your 4-man rotate mid and top. You just want to make sure that while you're in draft, you're keeping both of these strategies in mind and drafting accordingly. Now, like every map, we're going to talk about the camps. Because of how small this map is, the camps kind of have a medium importance here. Now, the Giants bot lane are not a huge priority because of their neutral spawn location. You only really want to worry about taking them if you have a player advantage in that lane. Now, as far as the Knights go, there's really no reason not to take the Knights as early as you can. I would recommend taking them as soon as they spawn at the beginning of the game, and take them whenever they're up as long as it doesn't allow your opponent to turn in. You don't want to be taking the Knights if it means that your opponent gets a turn in. And of course, we're going to talk about the boss. Because of how small the map is and the location of the boss, it's going to be very risky to take the boss unless you have at least a 2-player advantage. Even a 4-on-5 from your opponent could lead to them killing you and stealing the boss from you. So you want to make sure you have at least 2, ideally 3 of them dead before you even attempt the boss. That being said, if you are in a situation where you have just killed 3 or 4 of them and are able to take the boss, it's made even better if you can turn in as well. In this instance, you want to make sure that you're timing your turn in and your boss to push top lane at the exact same time for maximum effectiveness. The last thing I want to talk about are called micro turn-ins. These are turning in small amounts of gems. It could be 3, 4, 5 gems. I know a common strategy is to wait until you have 15, 20 gems to try to turn in, but in my opinion, that's not always the most effective method, and that's even a dangerous method. You run the risk of dying and losing all of those gems. So you want to make sure that you're utilizing micro turn-ins whenever you can do so without losing value somewhere else on the map. Towers of Doom. So Towers of Doom is going to be one of the more unique maps in the game, as it is the only map that you don't physically attack the enemy core. You're actually going to use the objective to do damage to the core. But before we get into that, let's hop into the tier list and I'll show you what heroes are good and not good on this map. So for Towers of Doom, you're of course going to have your priority on your globals. So Falstad, Dahaka, Brightwing, Deathwing, all going to be very strong here. But you're also going to have a high priority on things that have the ability to interrupt the altar channels. So a lot of mages are going to be a lot higher up here. So you'll have your Chromie, KT, those are all going to be very strong. And then on the other side, of course, you have your lower tier heroes, things like Probius, Butcher, who just aren't really going to hold up on a map like this. Even like something like a Vikings, even though they can put up pressure with how they can channel, they're just not really viable at this rank. And you have a few things that hang out here in mid, something like a Tyrande because of Owl, increases her viability a little bit more, as well as Kel'Thuzad with a global interrupt. And we can't forget about Abathur, who always has that kind of X factor depending on the sort of team comp you might build around him. Welcome back. Like many maps, globals are going to be very strong here. So you'll have something like a Dahaka, a Falstad, and many other globals that will be able to have a pretty big impact on this map. So you want to make sure you're keeping those in mind while you're drafting. Another aspect of this map is going to be the soaking, or I should say, how you soak. Now there's going to be two different viable ways to soak. There is the put your solo lane top lane, and then have your 4-man rotate mid and bot. But another almost more popular method is to have your 4-man bot, which a little bit more on that later, and then have your solo lane be something that can double soak top and mid. So something like a Zul would be very strong here, as well as a Leo. And the reason that you want to prioritize a strategy like this is because of the importance of bot lane. And what I mean by that is bot lane is going to be your highest priority lane that you are going to be wanting to focus on a majority of the game. And the reason for that is because bot lane is going to be where the highest amount of action happens. So down there, you're going to have 2 altar spawns that are connected to the lane, as well as 2 sapper camps that are also going to be connected to the lane. And you're going to be using these sappers to either push into the enemy fort, or if you control the enemy fort, you're going to be using those sappers to try to get a few extra shots on the enemy core. And on the topic of controlling the enemy fort, you want to make sure that after you take it, you don't just immediately leave and let the enemy take it back. You want to make sure that you keep 3 to 4 players down there to defend it, and then you rotate 1 player away to do other stuff on the map, whether it be take the sappers on the bottom or clear mid and top lane, which would be something your solo lane would be doing. So the reason that you do this is because you want to use the fact that you have this fort advantage to give yourself an advantage on the map. When the altars spawn, mid and bot, the enemy is going to have to take a very dangerous path to get to them, which is why holding bot lane is so important. The only time you're going to want to rotate away as a team from the bottom fort is going to be when an altar spawns top lane. You're going to get the double altar spawn top at some point during the game. That is the only time where your entire team should rotate away, because your enemy team is either going to have to give up double altar or give up bot fort. And the one other thing we're going to talk about today is going to be the boss. Now, the boss is something that is kind of a tricky thing to deal with on this map. While it is a very strong boss, because it does do 4 shots to the enemy core, a lot of players will give up bot lane to take the boss. You never want to do that. Holding bot lane is going to be more important than the 4 shots that the boss gives you because of the factors we talked about before. Because of the bot lane control, because of the sappers, because of the altar placement. All those are going to give you much more of an advantage than taking the boss once. Warhead Junction. So like I said before, this map is very much returning to the ranked map rotation. So we're going to start out with letting you guys see my tier list on who I think is good and not so good on this map. All right, this is going to be your quick overview of Warhead Junction. It's going to be very strong for global heroes, which is why things like Deathwing, Falstad, Brightwing, and so on and so forth are going to be strong up here. I actually put Abathur in A tier because of the push potential. So a lot of sieging heroes are going to be very strong here. And things that are more teamfight centric, like Maiev, Anubarak, are going to be a lot weaker because you're not actually going to be 5-on-5 team fighting as much. You're going to be doing a lot more with split pushing and skirmishing. So you're going to get a lot more value from poke heroes that can interrupt the channeling on the nukes, and skirmish sort of heroes like Genji and Tracer and stuff like that. So overall, you're going to find a lot more value from split pushing and skirmishes. Welcome back. So first things first, globals are going to be very, very strong here, as well as utilizing the new sewage teleporter, or whatever you guys want to call it. So there's going to be 2 sewage lines on 2 different parts of the map, and you can use those to teleport from either the top or the bottom or the top of the map. And of course, what would the map be without talking about the camps? So there's going to be some Hellbats on the map, as well as some Goliaths on the map. Both of those, obviously, you'll want to utilize with your siege to try to get structures down with that, as well as there's going to be one boss at the top of the map, and this boss is actually pretty strong. You want to utilize that if you have the opportunity to take it. It does a lot of damage to players and to structures as well. So if you can combo that with the nukes, that's going to be really good. And on that note, let's talk about the objective, which is the nukes. Now, those are going to spawn on multiple points of the map, as many as 4 at a time, and you'll have to channel it for a couple of seconds, and then you get an activatable button that you want to use on a structure. It takes a couple seconds to channel, but you'll be able to call down a nuke and blow up some buildings. Now, you want to realize that you'll be most optimal using the nukes with some sort of sieging hero, like maybe a Greymane or an Illidan, or something like that. That will be your most optimal way to utilize the objective. So the biggest thing to keep in mind here is you're not going to get as much value from characters like Maiev that really benefit from 5-on-5 teamfights, and you're going to get a lot more benefit from characters that are a lot better in skirmishes, so something like a Genji, for example, and things that are able to poke and interrupt. So something like a Chromie or a KT is going to get a little bit more value on a map like this.